Welcome to Wild Flow, the podcast with me, your host, Charlotte Pointeau. I'm a wild feminine cycle coach here for the awakened woman who is ready to reclaim her body, menstrual cycle and feminine power, and to live, love and lead in flow with nature's wisdom. In this podcast, I'll share how you can live in sync with your menstrual cycle and life seasons, heal your relationship with your womb and rites of passages, and embody your wild feminine as a multi-passionate woman in life, mothering and business. It's your time to flourish as a cyclical being in this modern world. Are you ready? Let's flow. Hey lovely, welcome back to Wild Flow. It's really lovely to have you here. So today we're talking about cycling with the moon, which is something that I am really interested in and passionate about and have really made part of my own practice over the last few years. I'm going to share today all about how the menstrual and moon cycles overlap, how you can sync your cycle with the moon if you want to, and how you can also use the moon cycle in place of your own menstrual cycle if you don't have one or if it's irregular. So first of all, I just want to drop in, just breathe in. Maybe you'd like to do this as well. Take a moment to breathe in and out of your body. Softening into your chair, wherever you are, if it's safe to do so if you're not driving. How are you today? How are you feeling? What cycle day are you on, or which season are you in? If you have a cycle. Today I'm on day 13. I'm in my inner spring. I'm not close to ovulating. And I'm feeling quite settled and grounded today. I'm excited to talk to you about the moon. How are you? Okay, welcome. The moon. So, the moon is known as a typically feminine energy with a feminine quality to her. There are many goddesses named after the moon. The goddess is thought to be the moon, represented by the moon in many cultures. The moon impacts the waters, the tides, the plant sap that rises as the full moon grows, and also our human bodies, which are up to 60% water. We believe that the full moon influences our behavior and our bodies. In ancient times, the full moon was the guiding light, the brightest light in the sky at night. There was no electric lighting, and so the real cycle of the moon was really felt when everyone lived outside in nature, in communities, in their simpler dwellings than what we have today. The darkness of the moon at new moon would be really felt, that real darkness. And then the moon, as it grows to fullness, would be really noticeable as well. And that's something that we've kind of lost touch with as we've got, more higher density housing. Not even everybody can see the moon from their home. But also we've got electric lighting. That means that we've got lights on well after dark here. So that connection with the moon has been eroded. And it's believed that what used to happen in these older times was that the pineal gland in the brain, it has a light receptor built in, and it's what observes the sun as it comes up and goes down, and also the moon as it moves from dark to bright to dark again. The pineal gland interprets the light signals, and it speaks to the different organs in our bodies that make hormones. Some hormones are made in the brain, and the reproductive hormones are made in the ovaries. So, the light cycle, when it's interpreted by the brain, it does influence the hormones that are made in our bodies. So that impacts both the daily sleep-wake cycle, which is why we know that if we are exposed to a lot of light, particularly blue light at nighttime, then our brains take longer to fall asleep and we don't sleep as well. And light also influences our reproductive sex hormones as well. So in ancient times, the full moon would trigger the body to ovulate more at full moon, and it was more common for women to bleed around the dark new moon. Now, it's not scientifically proven because science research wasn't a thing back then, but this is what's said. So it's said that most women would ovulate with the full moon and bleed with the dark new moon. Women would gather in the moon lodge to bleed and to be nurtured and to have time away from chores. And really the point of this was to gather, but to dream and to vision and to use the feminine psychic intuition to gather wisdom that would inform how tribes lived and to make decisions related to where the community would live, when to hunt, when to harvest, important decisions that were made. Often women's psychic intuition was really valued and respected for its visioning capacity that really was heightened at menstruation. We also know that when women and girls are together a lot, it's really common to see our menstrual cycles syncing together. And this might have been something that you've noticed if you grew up in a house with other sisters and with your mom, or perhaps you lived together with other women. You might have noticed that your cycles were synced, and it's thought that this occurs through pheromones, the chemicals that we give off, the sex chemicals that we absorb from each other, and it's thought that these cause our cycles to sync together. But scientifically speaking, it hasn't been shown through research to be true. It does appear to be chance. But, this idea of syncing our cycles is something that's really present for us, particularly, I bet if you're connected with your menstrual cycle, it's something that you've thought about. And, a lot of people talk about wanting to sync your cycle with the moon, and there being this right way to bleed, this right time of when to bleed and when to ovulate, and being something that we want to be in sync with the moon, and doing things at the right time. I just want to say straight away, there's absolutely no right or wrong time or wrong way, no right time to bleed or to ovulate. It's really not better if you're ovulating with the full moon and bleeding with the dark moon. It's not right or wrong. We are out of sync with the moon and through this natural light that we just don't have so much of at nighttime. And we are generally out of sync with each other. We don't live in such close communities anymore. So this idea of syncing, it's something that sort of feels ancestral, but really, in truth, there's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong pattern. It is what it is. However, there are different meanings that are attached to how your cycle lines up with the moon cycle. And we'll get onto this later. And this comes back to the idea of, what it means spiritually to be on a certain cycle. It's also possible and powerful to follow the moon cycle if you don't have a menstrual cycle at all as well, or if it's irregular. This is what I'm really passionate about. I really like to use the moon cycle when I've not had a menstrual cycle or whilst it's irregular, and it helps me to live as if I have this regular cycle. So I'm going to explain about what this means as well, because I've found that when my own cycle is unpredictable and long, following the moon cycle instead of looking for my own menstrual cycle has helped me to feel grounded and anchored and connected into myself. I find it gives me more patience. I feel like I've got a cycle, I feel like I'm more aware of how I'm feeling and accepting of the changes in my emotions as well, and energy, without needing to understand it or question it or look for signs trying to work out what's going on with my own cycle. It also stops me feeling quite so thrown by the different feelings that I have. So it builds this sense of self-compassion, and it gives me a framework to use for self-care, creativity, rest, play, all of the things that you would normally look to harness through your menstrual cycle. So if you don't have a regular or any menstrual cycle at all, you can work with the moon cycle instead. So firstly, what is the moon cycle and how does it mirror the menstrual cycle? So the moon takes about 28-29 days to cycle through all of its phases. And so the moon revolves around the earth, and the earth spins and moves around the sun. So it looks to us from wherever you are on this earth that the moon has this cycle, and it goes from a dark or new moon, and it grows in light all the way through to full moon, and then it shrinks again all the way back to dark or new moon. And what's happening is, when you can see the moon, that's actually the sunlight that's reflecting back off the moon's surface and bouncing down to your eyes, your brain, down on earth. So you can see how much of the moon is illuminated by the sun in relation to your position on the earth. So when you can see the full moon, that's because the whole of the moon is catching or reflecting the sun's light. And when you can't see the moon at all, that's because it's in the shadow. So on one side of the earth is the sun, and on the other side of the earth is the moon. So the moon is in shadow because that earth in the middle is creating the shadow. So, and then, you've got half moon, and you've got, the growing moon, which is the waxing moon, where it's going from dark, getting lighter and lighter until it gets to full moon. And then the waning moon, which is getting smaller. So it's going from full moon back to dark moon. So the four main phases of the moon are, like I say, new moon when it's dark, first quarter moon, which is when it's a growing half moon. Then we've got full moon, when you can see the full moon. All of it is illuminated. And then we have got the half moon again, which is third quarter. So when only half of the moon is lit and it's getting smaller. So you can actually, look at 8 phases, which are when you've got the crescent moons as well, which is when it's that beautiful, like a C shape. So that's the crescents that you also get. So you get different amounts of different sizes of the crescent before and after the half moon. So I'll drop a link down here so that you can see what the moon looks like at all of these different 8 phases. But I just really like to keep it simple and work with the 4 main phases of the moon. So new moon, first quarter, full moon, third quarter. And I find that this is really simple. I like to make things simple. Each of these phases of the moon has got a distinctive energy. So they have these energies, these qualities to them that you can really tune into if you like. So it's said that the new moon is darkness, it's stillness, it's quiet. And it's said that this is a match for the menstrual phase of the menstrual cycle, and also like the season of winter. So it's this time of endings and beginnings. It's this time of stillness and quietness. It's looking within. It's a brilliant time to dream, to vision, to set some new intentions for the new cycle ahead, whether that's menstrual or moon. It's a time when dreaming can be more powerful. We can tune into our intuitive, psychic capacities. It's a beautiful time to just be still and not take any action, just to be, and just to let things be, let things settle, to really honor that ending before we jump into the new beginning. So just as with the menstrual phase, you can really work with this. You can practice, you can use these energies when it's new moon. So it's all about setting intentions but not jumping into action. The next phase is the first quarter moon. So this is when the moon is growing and you can now see half of the moon illuminated. This is a match for the follicular phase or the inner spring or the season of spring. So it's a time when the light is growing, so energy is rising. It's a time to start planning and taking action and to start doing a little bit more in the world. It's a time of choosing which of the intentions you set at the new moon that you really want to work with, that you're really growing, and refining out any of the intentions or the plans or the visions or the seeds you sowed back in the new moon phase that you've decided it's not actually the right time. It's not time for that. I don't have capacity for that. I'm going to just thin out those ideas that it's not the right time for, pop them to one side and revisit them later. And I'm going to focus all of my energy on like the strongest seeds. So this is a really beautiful growing action energy, but just like with the menstrual cycle, it's important to remember not to tip straight into action and go too hard too soon. It's important to pace yourself, to be really discerning and to be wise with how you're using your energy. But it's a time to start manifesting, start calling in what you really want to work with. After that, we've got the full moon. Now, full moon, you probably think of like wolves howling and children going crazy and lots of people turning up to hospitals and all hell breaking loose. There's lots of talk about how the full moon kind of drives us a little bit more crazy or, brings us really outwards, causes some chaos. Well, the full moon is this energy, is this peak energy. It can really build. Lots of people really feel that it really pulls them outwards and that it can feel like you're riding the crest of this wave and you've got to really try and keep yourself balanced and grounded because it can be quite a big energy. Sometimes we have super full moons as well, which is when the moon is actually a little bit closer to the earth and so that the moon looks a lot bigger in the sky. And that gravitational pull that the moon exerts over the earth, which directs the tides coming in and out, a lot of us are sensitive and feel that. I bet you've noticed that on some full moons that you feel just particularly kind of, sleep might be a bit harder. You might feel a bit more emotional or energized in your body in a kind of unsettled way. A lot of people really feel this. So full moon is like the representation of ovulation in the cycle as well. It's also like summer. So it's this real peak. It's this heat and intensity. So if you are working with the moon, it's this perfect time to allow your creations to come to fruition. It's a time of taking your foot off the gas and not going so hard and just allowing it to be, like riding that wave, doing what you can to balance yourself to work through. It's a time when, you're able to, all your manifesting is coming through. Everything is coming to life. Everything is coming to you. So what your intentions were that you set back in the new moon now will be starting to come true for you. It's that time of seeing what's grown and what's blossomed. It's not a time for starting anything new, and it's a time to really look after yourself, to remember to be stable, to support yourself, and to enjoy as well. Enjoy the creativity, the manifesting, enjoy this outward energy as much as you can. So it's a bit about balance as well. After full moon, the moon starts to get dark again. So About a week later, it will become third quarter moon. So the waning moon is getting slower. So this is just like the premenstrual phase, of your menstrual cycle. And it's like autumn. So just with autumn and the leaves are starting to drop, it's a time of slowing, of letting go, of pulling yourself, allowing yourself to be pulled within. So your sort of outward self is beginning to be pulled inwards. And this can be a time of tension, just like in the menstrual cycle, where it can feel really good to be outwards, to be connecting, to be out in the world. And a lot of us really struggle with letting go. So, this darkening moon, it's an invitation to let go, to stop being so outwards, to stop doing and move more and more into that being energy. It's a time of really checking in with yourself, looking back and celebrating and having gratitude, giving thanks for everything that has been in this cycle, all the things that have been created, all the things that have manifested, but also taking stock of what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. So this is how it overlaps with the premenstrual phase of the menstrual cycle as well. So it's this time of pulling back within, letting go, slowing down, turning our attention inwards, and not starting anything new. Looking forward to the ending of the cycle, which comes at the next new moon. So it's an ending. It can bring up grief as well. It can be a challenging time depending on what your relationship is to rest and to endings, and to honoring the cycle that's not always in this outward doing, hyperproductive phase. So allowing this moon to guide you inwards. And then we get back to the next new moon, which is the end and the beginning of the new cycle. So I like to treat dark moon, which is the night before new moon, as the ending of a cycle. And I like to have a little celebration. I like to really think about, to look back and to reflect on what has been, and then allow the new moon the next night to be the start of the new cycle. It's a little bit like how Christmas is like the end of one year, like that celebration at the end of the year, and then New Year's is like, that full point, that peak of, ending into beginning, like that transition. So you can see how you can work with the moon cycle, how it matches up with the menstrual cycle. And also it's an invitation to use the moon cycle if you actually don't have a regular menstrual cycle, or even one at all. So if you're breastfeeding, if you're pregnant, if you have irregular cycles for whatever reason, or if you have amenorrhea for whatever reason, then you can work with the moon cycle instead. And it's so powerful to do that, like I said, because it offers you this cyclic approach to living, to checking in with yourself, to your creativity and productivity, to manifesting, to just being really attuned with nature and the cycles, even if you don't have that inbuilt cycle within. It can be really lovely to practice moon rituals as well. So like I said here, you might have teased out, some of the things I've talked about, doing an intention setting ritual at new moon, doing a refining ritual, like, checking in at first quarter moon. What isn't serving me? What can I let go of? At full moon, it's common to do like a release ritual, which I also think, it's not just about releasing. I feel like that, it really comes in the second half of the cycle, but it's celebration, it's gratitude. And as you move into the darker moon, as we get, to the third quarter moon, that's a really nice time for doing release rituals, I think, to really, let go of what has been and what you don't want to carry over into the next cycle. So this is the invitation of the cycle, to take it bit by bit, to be patient, to be really careful and wise with how you're spending your energy, to have gratitude and presence throughout, and then to let go and refine and to rebirth yourself and to do things differently each and every cycle. So beautiful. So that's some ways that you can really work with the moon cycle, whether you have a menstrual cycle or not. Now, if you do have a menstrual cycle and you want to sync with the moon, I'm going to share some tips for how you might do that. So just to be really clear, this is not something you have to do. There's absolutely no pressure. It's no right or wrong when you bleed. So there are different patterns for whether you bleed or ovulate around certain moons. So I'm just going to give an overview to what they are. So the first one is called a white moon cycle. So white moon is where you bleed at the new moon and ovulate at the full moon. And this is the one that people think that they would like to or need to or should be synced with. So ovulating at full moon, bleeding at the new moon. And this is really aligned with the mother phase or archetype. So it's the one that's being most valued historically, because it's said that the energy is pulled inwards at new moon to replenish yourself, and then you're creating and ovulating with the full moon, which is the biggest creative energy. And it's an outward energy, so it's, aligned with fertility and childbirth and, procreating and giving, to the next generation, back to your community to procreate. So this is the one that's like archetypally the one, if you're talking about syncing your cycle with the moon, that's the one that you would probably think of. The opposite to that, though, is called a red moon cycle. So this is where you would ovulate at the new moon when it's dark and then bleed at the full moon. So this is aligned with the priestess, the healer, and the teacher archetype. It's about your creative energy being pulled outwards. It's aligned with having a passion for circles, for learning, for personal growth, and also for empowering others. And there's a deep connection here to sexual energy, because you're ovulating with the new moon, which is a very internal energy. So it's about, it's said to be about cultivating that sexuality, that sensuality, that pleasure, and enjoying it for yourself, which historically was said to not be in service of community, as in linked to fertility. It was more about being this priestess, this healer, this archetype that is sharing this creative energy with others in this different way, rather than being related to fertility. So both of these are really beautiful and really powerful. If you're open to these spiritual connections to which cycle you're on, you might notice which one you're on right now. If you're clearly on either of those, then just reflecting on how those descriptions land with you. But of course, you might bleed and ovulate at different times between those. And so there's actually two other cycles called the pink and the purple moon cycles. So the pink moon is when you bleed with the waxing, the growing moon. And this is said to be a cycle that your body might fall into if you're in a transitional phase in your life. It's about expansion. So as the moon expands, you're personally expanding. It's said to be linked to leaving a rest or a shadow phase of your life and digging into and uncovering your personal strength and your personal power. So the opposite of that is the purple moon cycle. And this is about bleeding when the moon is waning, so when it's getting smaller and darker. So again, this is linked to transition, but in the opposite. This is said to be about an invitation to really pull you into the dark depths, to explore your personal shadows, your wounds, what's going on for you within. And it's also an invitation to release and to retreat. So these are the four archetypal cycles linked to the moon. But, you might find that one month you bleed with the new moon, and a little while later you're bleeding with the full moon. It's possible for your cycle to ebb and flow and to change, maybe even to be a white moon cycle, and then a few months later to be a red moon cycle. And this is really possible. Our cycles can shift around. It can happen really commonly. It happens with a lot of women that I work with, when we're really paying attention to our cycles, especially under times of change and stress, because stress is one of the biggest ways, one of the biggest influences that delays ovulation in our body. So if your ovulation is delayed because of stress, the stress is inhibiting the hormones that need to be produced at high enough levels to trigger ovulation. So stress can dampen down your hormones. So if ovulation is delayed, it means as well that your bleeding is delayed. And so your cycle gets longer. And so instead of being the same length of time as the moon's phase, it can be pulled out much longer. And so over time, you're noticing that you're bleeding or you're ovulating at different moons to perhaps previous cycles. So if you do have a menstrual cycle and you want to sync with the moon, here's some things that you can do. So as I've talked about, the light that our brains are exposed to is a really key way of regulating our hormones. So something that you can do is to make sure that after dark you are turning off as many lights as possible if you're in the home, that you're trying not to be on screens, computers, devices, late into the night. And if you are, you could try to wear blue blocker glasses that block out that blue light that disrupts our brain chemistry so much. You can also, particularly avoiding screen time within 1 hour of sleep. If you wake up in the middle of the night, try to avoid turning on any lights, or just use a very dim light if possible. You can use a salt lamp as well. You can also moonbathe. So this means to go outside and to stand and gaze at the moon, and to do this across your cycle. So especially at full moon, if you can go outside and really look at the moon, stare at it for quite a while, let that moonlight speak to your brain. And you might even want to sleep with your curtains open so that you are letting that moonlight flood your bedroom. Though if you live in a really built up area where there's lots of street lights, this is definitely going to be a challenge, because you're not going to notice the swings between light and dark. But if you're somewhere where that's not so much of an issue, this can be really helpful. So sleeping with your curtains open at full moon, being outside staring at the full moon. But then, for the rest of the cycle, blocking out the light as much as possible in your bedroom. If you do live in an area where there's no street lamps, going outside and being in that absolute pitch black darkness of the new moon can help to offer that balance, that contrast to the bright full moon. Now, where I live, it's we're in the middle of the countryside. I've got neighbours, but we barely have any street lights. And when I go outside into my garden and it's full moon, I feel like there's a UFO that's descended on the garden and it's shining. I'm thinking of one of those like flying saucers that's got like the spotlight underneath it. It's like that. Like the moon is just so intense. It just floods our garden with moonlight. Like you don't need a torch. It's just so bright. It's shocking. And then at dark moon, new moon, it's just so dark. Like it's just pitch black. Like if I'm up in the night with my little one, I can't see where I'm going. It's like, it's really, really, really dark. And I never noticed that until I moved here. I've always lived in cities. So it might be something that you're able to connect with and it might not be. Something else you can do is just to notice the moon's pattern across the sky. So notice if you see the moon rise or set out of a particular window. in your home. So for me, our lounge room looks directly at the moon rise. Like the moon rises straight out the window up into the sky, and we've got really high cathedral windows, and so I can see the moon going up. And I've learnt just from observing that at full moon, the moon rises at around bedtime. My kids' bedtime, that is, not my bedtime, I should say. At about, I don't know, it's about 6 p.m.-ish here, something like that. So each day the moon rises an hour later than the day before. So over a month, we sort of come back to about the same time. So I know that at dinner time, particularly in winter when it's dark, just after sunset, when the sky's dark, if I look out this particular window, I can see the moon rise, and it always rises in the same place. And it takes until about midnight or so for the moon to be directly above. And then it sets on the other side of the house. When it's new moon, I can't see the moon rise because the moon is actually up in the sky during the day. You can't see the light, you can't see it reflecting back at you because the sun is much brighter. So for example, here, when it's new moon, the moon rises actually 6:30 in the morning and it doesn't set until 6 p.m. So we've got the moon's in the sky for the whole day. You just can't see it because it's not bright. But as the moon gets more towards first quarter, it starts to rise later. And so the moon set is later. And so you will see it at nighttime once the sky gets dark, just for a few hours. But when it's full moon, that's when it's really up in the sky from sunset until sunrise. So just noticing, when you can see the moon in the sky, where it rises, what shape it is, what time of day, because in summer, it's still light when the full moon rises, but it's still truly beautiful to look at. So connecting with that. If you chart your menstrual cycle, you can also write down each day what phase the moon is in. So just noticing, what sort of cycle you're on, what the moon is doing, just looking for it, noticing what energy it has, noticing whether it's in a similar energy to the phase of your menstrual cycle you're in. So, if you are lined up with the moon, then you might feel that, if you're bleeding and it's also a new moon, that can feel like you're being pulled really, really inwards. Whereas if you're bleeding and it's full moon, it's like your body wants to pull you inwards, but the moon is pulling you outwards. So just noticing again, like, are the energies aligned? Are they in contrast? How does that feel to you? There's no right way or wrong way, but just noticing. Awareness is always key. If you don't have a menstrual cycle, then you can still practice menstrual cycle awareness. Then instead of checking in with your blood and your ovulation and your cervical fluid, you're checking in with the moon. So noticing every day what moon phase you're seeing in the sky, and checking in with yourself. How am I feeling today? How am I feeling physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? Is there any alignment with the moon? What is the quality of the moon energy? Is it this manifesting energy, or is it a letting go energy? Can you work with that? Can you let that lead you through your day? Can you let that lead you through your week? Can you let that lead you all cycle long? So if you're trying to sync yourself with the cycle, just allow yourself several cycles to sync. If it's your menstrual cycle, and if you don't have a menstrual cycle, then just tuning in, allowing it to be, allowing it to unfold. And with time, you can really lean into the moon energy and work with it, for creativity, for manifestation, for rituals, even just to remember the importance of rest and slowness and letting go and working cycle by cycle and not trying to do everything at once and burning out. However you do it, it's a really beautiful tool, and I really encourage you to just to notice the moon. As we say, noticing the seasons around you and just noticing how you're feeling within. and letting it be a reminder of the importance and the value of cycles and cyclical living. Okay, let me know how you get on. So much love to you. Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.